Howdy folks, Little John in the brewery, out in the garage, and it's time to keg up the Sunshine Ale. So I'm going to go through, as has been requested, and as I said, I'm going to go through this video and look back. I've taken footage of the actual pressure ferment. This was done under a full pressure ferment, so I've taken some photos, a little bit of footage along the way since brew day, and I'll link that up as we go through. Basically go through the process, what it's looked like through the ferment, and from my side, what I sort of thought as we've gone along the way, and at the end, and we'll actually go through and get it in the keg, do that pressure transfer, the closed transfer with no oxygen. So so Sunshine Ale, I'll pop a link up the top back to brew day. So it's just a light summery ale, brewed back on the 20th of October. So we are on the, what's today? I think it's the 9th, 8th. I think it's the 9th. Lost track of whatever bloody day I'm on. Let me just quickly fire up the bloody computer, it'll tell me. Either way, so we're looking 11, 20, 21 days, basically 3 weeks since this ferment started. I probably was looking to get this out a little bit quicker. That was what I thought with the pressure ferment. I thought I'd be able to get this out a little bit quicker. Okay, no, hang on, 8th of November. Oh God, I've really lost track of my days, haven't I? Okay, so what's that make it? 19 days. So that's fairly standard for what I'd like to do with a ferment. So I'm not too worried about that. But I said I was sort of expecting it would have finished up a little bit earlier. And as you'll see as we go through, wasn't necessarily the case. But so this has been in the fridge the whole time. It's originally in at 17 degrees. Computer's going to want to give me all my notifications now. And that's where she started. I pitched 2 packs of US-05 rehydrated on the original batch. Okay, just getting clarify me notes here. Yeah, 2 packs US-05 rehydrated, which were pitched onto the brew. That was on the brew day video. Actually went into the fridge at 14.8 degrees. It started, so 15 degrees. Original gravity 1048, and I just left the spunding valve closed, so it would build pressure. It would hold just every bit of pressure that was on there, and let it go. So first check I did was at 13 hours. At that point it had built up 6 psi of pressure on the gauge, and you can see it was just that little bit of bubbling sort of on top. It was just starting to get a little bit of bubbling around the outside of the fermenter, sort of where that krausen ring starts. So it was starting to show, some signs that the yeast was, doing something. I I don't have a tilt or anything like that, so I've got no checking of gravity as we go through as a result. So that was 13 hours. That's the next morning. That night, so this was 23 hours after pitching, so almost a day. Pressure had come up to 7 psi. And you can see there's just the bubbles have just started to get a little bit more on the surface. It's just starting to really look like something's starting to happen. But at that point there was no real activity in the brew itself. It didn't look like it was really doing anything. There was a nice solid yeast cake. You've seen the pictures. Yeah, a nice solid yeast cake at the bottom. The yeast had got down there ready to do its thing. So there's plenty of yeast in there. It's grown nicely. Happy with that. Next check was at 36 hours. So that would have been the next morning. And it was starting to, things had kicked along. We jumped up to 10 psi on the gauge, and you can see there's that nice little bit of that nice krausen, about ½ inch thick. It had settled in, and it was starting to get some activity, starting to show through the wort. So things are happening. And again, as I said, this is 15 degrees, so we've kept the temperature fairly restrained and low, so it hasn't kicked into a big active ferment. At 48 hours, so 2 days in, I don't know exactly what it got to. I think the PSI had crept up to about 11 and a half on the gauge. I wound the spunding valve back and dropped it back to around that 10 psi, which is where I was sort of wanted to run. I was happy to run it around that 10 psi through the main part of the ferment. I was pretty happy with that. And at that stage, the krausen had gotten quite thick. Was starting to get quite creamy. The krausen was still only maybe an inch and a quarter. It wasn't massive, but it was very, very dense and creamy. You could see that. And you can see it in the pictures. So didn't really do anything with it. There's no pictures until got to day 4, and at that point I popped the keg into the fridge with the fermenter. I raised the temperature to 16.8, 17 degrees, and I took the spunding valve off, put the line on and connected that to the keg. So basically let the pressure that was in the fermenter go off. CO2 was being produced, was then bleeding off into the keg. So I purged off the oxygen in that and had the spunding valve on that keg. So the keg very quickly picked up the 10 psi as well. So we had the fermenter was sitting at 10 psi. The keg was sitting with 10 psi of CO2 in it, and was basically now to some degree acting sort of like a big airlock. And I did that for 2 reasons. One, I wanted to purge the keg, but it was like, okay, well, this is free. It's free CO2. I don't need to pay for it. It's already been produced. And the second thing was knowing that when I cold crashed, I was just going to transfer whatever was in that keg was going to come back. There was nothing else going to come in. So if there was any suck back, I was only going to drag the CO2 from that other keg. So there's no issue of completely making sure there's no oxygen to worry about there at all. So let that go. So that was day 4. Day 5, after having yeah, 24 hours at the higher temperature, there was still a nice, thick, heavy, creamy krausen. So it had been like that for a good couple of days. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, it's day 5. I was really expecting to have maybe been getting towards the end of the ferment. But it was a good krausen. It was bloody active. There was a lot of action going on in the wort itself. Still that good big yeast cake at the bottom, but it was a lot more active than I thought it would have been at that point. And it was like, and I said, because I didn't have, so I've got the tilt, it was like, okay, I wasn't taking a sample, so I was just letting it run. I wanted to use a visual check really to gauge how the ferment was progressing and when it was going to be finished. So let it go. I wound, at the end of day 5, I wound the spunding valve in just a little bit. I was just trying to pull up a little bit more pressure before I got to a cold crash. Sort of, I'm thinking, okay, well, if it's got pressure at 17 degrees, when I cold crash, that pressure is going to get, that gas is going to get dragged more into the liquid. So assuming I'm going to drop some pressure, so I want some more pressure in there if I'm going to sort of to take advantage of the gas. So wound it up and it ended up coming up to 12 psi, and just let that run. So by the 31st, so which was now 11 days, ferment was finished, or appeared to be finished. It was fairly, activity had all but stopped. The krausen had dropped. I took a sample, just simply by sticking a disconnect and an open-ended tube onto the outlet, and just use the same pressure. So as soon as I popped that disconnect onto the gas post, or in this case it was a liquid post, bang, I got beer flow. So I'd done that, just pop it off and it stopped. And that was an easy way to take the sample, degas that, and gave me a gravity of 1010, which was 1 point under the expected gravity. So I was pretty confident that stage we were finished. So I started dropping the temperature, and over 2 days I dropped it down to 1.8. So on the 2nd of November, so now 13 days in, I took the gas line off the Allrounder, so it was basically just stuck with its own pressure. Took the spunding valve off the keg and just stuck it back on to onto the fermenter just to see what effect there'd been on the gas. And basically what I've been seeing, and it was showing on the keg as well, as it got colder, the pressure was dropping. And that's what I was expecting it to do. I expected the CO2 to get taken up into the liquid, and therefore the pressure to drop. And that's exactly what it did. And got to the point where we got back to 7.5 psi, which has kept coming down. That was on the 2nd. Since then, everything's dropped. Any sign of activity is completely finished, and the gas is now sitting, I think, around 6 psi. So I'm interested to see how much carbonation is in that when I pull it off. Because obviously the idea is that with the pressure ferment, the closed transfer, is that you're kegging carbonated beer, and it's just ready to drink. Now, at 6 psi, I don't think that's going to be really carb enough to drink. It's going to need some time in the keg, which isn't an issue. That's not a problem. But what I was looking at was I was trying to find a way around where I can just go straight from the fermenter into bottles. Now, I have found a bit of a workaround from watching some stuff with other YouTube, other videos and stuff, and I've got some gear coming shortly, which will help, which I'm hoping I'll be able to do that with. But I want to get this fermenter out. I want to get it out so I can get another brew on. I want at least one more brew done that's going to be drinkable for Christmas. So I really need to get that in, tomorrow, hopefully. So I've got to get it out. So I'm just going to put the whole lot into 2 kegs, and then I'll just bloody pressure bottle from the keg, as opposed from the fermenter. It shouldn't make any difference. The other advantage is I'm going to take a sample shortly from the fermenter, see how gassy it is, and get an idea. Then I may need to put both of these kegs onto gas, for 24, 48 hours or so, slightly higher pressure, just to build the CO2 level up. We will see how we go. But yeah, that's how it's been coming through. Sorry if it's been a bit long-winded, but that's the process. That's where we've got to. As I said, it wasn't any quicker than a normal ferment. But for me, that's not the issue's not about making it faster. It's about just making it, looking to get better beer, no oxygen input and all the rest of it. And like I said, that idea of getting carbonated beer into the keg is also a bit of a bonus as well. So I wasn't too worried there. Obviously, you could pump the idea. Really, I think is you push the temperature up, a few more degrees than you normally would, and the pressure supposedly stops any of those esters from developing from those higher temperatures, so you can ferment faster. That's something I'll play with down the track a little bit. Didn't happen on this brew, so that's all good. So I'm going to go in now. I'm going to drag it out, get it out, get set up so I can do the transfer. I'll switch over to change the cameras around a bit so we can see what's going on. We'll drag a sample and we'll have a look at actually getting pressure ferment from the Allrounder into the keg. Right, so move this around so I can see the lady. I'm going to say, this is not the easiest thing in the world to move. We got there. It's nice and cold, looking nice and clear. We've got the yeast cake is sitting just under the 2 litre mark. So telling me I've got around 21.5 litres. So I should get, according to that, I've got 19.5, maybe even about 19.5. So I can get these kegs full without too much trouble. So its bunding valve is showing 6 psi in the fridge, and straight away, as soon as it's come out of the fridge, it's in a warmer air. And I've jostled around a little bit. It's jumped up to about 6.5, so already it's bleeding off CO2 out of the liquid back into the headspace. So I'm going to take that off because it's no good to me on there. Now this is the keg that was in the fridge that was gassed on. So what I want to do, I just want to check what the gas is. Well, I need this funding valve on here for the transfer. So I need to go up to around. So I'm going to put the beer in via the outpost. So it goes straight to the bottom. So funding valve will go on the in post, and so this keg is sitting at 8 psi. So I've actually got more pressure in this keg than this. That's not going to work. I need negative pressure. I need more pressure in here. So what I'm going to do is just push a little bit of pressure on here. Grab my gas bottle. Now, I've got to say, I'm really liking, where'd that go? I am liking the pushing fittings for doing this. It does make life nice and easy. And they're good. Gas on there. And I'm just going to take that up so I've got more gas in here. So that's about, oh no, that's about 10 psi in there. Let's just make it a bit more, take about 12. Just going to get this bottle out of the way. Yeah, again, I'm still getting the hang of these transfers, so it's not completely smooth sailing, but all good. So what we got? Gas connected to the Fermzilla, or the Allrounder, whatever your vessel is, at a higher pressure than the vessel we're going into. So we've got 12 psi in here, and that will maintain 12 psi because we're connected to the gas bottle. Here we're sitting at, it's about 8 psi, so we have a negative impact. So I will pop the beer line on there, and that is on, now it is on the out. And this is where these comes in. So we'll put this onto our beer line, which is sitting on the, you can't see it, it's got the little ball on the end of the line. So the actual pickup sits below it, which can cause a bit of an issue towards the end, but hopefully we don't worry about that right now. So now, as soon as I put this beer on, we should get a beer flow. Beer in the line. And she's dropping very slow. So both. Okay, so as soon as I put the gas on, I picked up extra pressure in here. So that's a good indication that we've got our closed system. And this is coming out very, very slow at the moment because this has come up now to 9.5 and it's slowly increasing. So this is going to equalise to here. So what I want to do Let's just wind the spinning valve out slowly till it starts relieving the gas from this keg, and that will, you can hear that now, she's bleeding, and you start getting this the beer transferring that a little bit quicker. So the quicker, the more gas we take out of here, the faster we take it out, the faster the beer's going to come over. And there's no great need to do it super fast, but it's also no great need to do it slow either. We've got no problem with oxygen, so we're not worried about whether we get too much speed. You know, normally you're trying to keep your transfer nice and slow, so you're not getting any splashing. This, it doesn't really matter. So pressure here is now about 8 psi, dropping a little bit. That's just happening. Slowly dropping here. Adjust. That's our biggest problem. I packed the pressure off here, so I've got no bloody, not maintaining that 10 psi. So that's back on 10. Righto, so we're halfway through the transfer, and you'll find that one thing you get when you transfer a nice and cold to your keg is that you get the condensation line working its way up the keg, so you can actually see how much beer you've got in there already. So it's a bit of an extra way of checking, not just going off the volume on the actual villa itself. So like I said, there's, I'm going to pick up the ground and the light. It's sitting on, we won't take it properly, but around 7 psi. Gas bottle sitting around 10. Fraction under. And there's that siphon ball there. Again, it's not bloody picking up on the full, but you can see down here is where the pickup tube is. And she comes up from the top. So there we're getting towards being full on there. Okay, we're near done here. We're coming up to the weld, which is about where I want to be. We're sitting on, just hit 13 litres, so pretty close to what we wanted. Further. Okay, that'll do us. Okay, pop the beer line off. We'll stop our transfer. Beautiful. Set it for the moment. Okay, and so we got 6 psi there, which is what we started off with before the transfer. So that's pretty bung on where we expect it to be. So there you have it. One keg. Done, filled, completely sealed, no oxygen at all, and yeah, nice and clean. This beer clean as, should remain clean as, without any issue. I want to get a bloody, get a sample. After your pressure. Anyway, so I'm just going to swap that over, and we've got enough pressure in there to pour ourselves a beer. brewer. So obviously it's holding 6 psi, it's not going to be carved as well as it could be, but I'm just going to show if I'm not. There's a nice carbonation in there. Looks alright. So, sunshine ale, straight out of the keg. You can't get any fresher. Okay, it's cold, it's clean. Sorry, big whopping spider walking across the garage. He doesn't get to do that and live. So it's definitely carb. You can drink that no problem at all. The carbonation that's in there. It's not crystal clear, but it is fairly clear. That's it. Pour them overhead. Drinkable as it is, no problem at all. There's a slightly unusual nose, which I'm assuming is going to be from the compression of esters and whatnot. It's not a bad snort or anything. It's just sort of not quite the hop smell that I've been sort of expecting. But we're not here to review this at the moment. I will do a review on this beer, and I'll give it 2 weeks in the keg just to get a little bit more time to age. But as it is, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Straight from the fermenter. So it is true. You could quite easily use this as a serving vessel. There's one way they do advertise, that they do sort of do market it, that you can do that. But reality is that keg now could go straight on the tap and drinking, not having to wait 2 weeks for it to carb up. I think when it's gassed enough, I don't think it particularly needs any more. For me, that's a great success. I'm really happy with that. So I'm not going to worry about putting this keg on. Obviously, it's just going to be the same thing again. So I'm not gonna put that on. So as always, cheers to all the anyone who's subscribing to Little John. Big thumbs up to all the Patreons. Cheers, guys. Hope you've got something out of this. You learned something. Hopefully it might make that process a little bit clearer for you, how it works. As always, got any comments or questions, stick them down the bottom. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button down there as well. Come along, that's what we'll do. Little John, making beer, teaching you all these processes and what you got to do. Coming up with nice beers along the way. Anyway, I'm done. I'm going to finish this, and I'll catch you later. So, till I see you again. We're drinking beer, talking beer, or brewing beer. Good brewing.